Hey, before we get started, I wanted to let you know that I've created a free download for you. This is pertaining to this topic of stabilization of something I made. I think you'll love it. Click on the link down below, grab it completely free, read it, figure out how to deploy it into your business, and let me know what you think. On to the podcast. Hey, welcome back to Disaster Podcaster. We are in season 5, and this is episode number 13. We're actually, fun fact, we're recording this on Friday the 13th. So it probably means that just anything can happen. So welcome back. If you've watched all of our episodes before, enjoy this new one. If you haven't, you've got 5 seasons to binge on and have some fun. Today's a really cool one. I haven't really done it exactly like this before, but we picked a topic that we wanted to talk about. And then we just opened it up to the interwebs and the social media and the forums and said, who would like to discuss their approach and their processes around stabilization for specifically mitigation projects. And I had a few people chime in. We had a lot of consultants and educators and teachers. I didn't want that perspective. I'd like people in the field doing it. I've got Corey Berger. So today I've got Corey Berger from JDR Restoration outside of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and Jake Blanton. And they're both going to introduce themselves a little bit more, but I would like to welcome everybody in. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, Clark.
I'd like you to introduce you all to the world of the Restoration Nation. We do have a lot of people over a long period of time that will contact us and say, hey, I watched this podcast. I learned something new. That was great. Thank you. And I'm hoping that today delivers that kind of aha moment for people, especially that are questioning what this even means. So Corey, tell us real quick, 60-second, big, long elevator, 13th floor.
Yeah. So I came into the restoration industry about 5 years ago with Jeremy Newman at Crown Restoration, San Antonio, Texas. I worked there for, 2.5 years. Been here at JDR Restoration in Fort Worth with CJ Reed for another 2.5 years. Came into it from teaching. Actually, I was a teacher before this. Got out of that, wanted to do something else, reached out to a friend in Jeremy Newman and got into this industry. And, I take pride in having learned and grown in this industry relatively quickly. I'm a IICRC Master Water Restorer. And, one thing that we do here is we pride ourselves on, top-end customer service and being the best there is. Because, there's 100, restoration companies on every corner really, but we want to be the one that sets apart, by the things that we do. And so we treat our customers well, and we have technical expertise. And so that's a quick brief overview about me and what we do here.
Awesome. Hey, Jake, tell us a little bit about Jake Blanton.
Hey, how are you? So I'm a father of 5, and with that, it keeps me very busy and not on top of just all of the business. But I've been in the restoration world almost 20 years. I just finished my actual triple masters through the IICRC. So fire, water, and textiles, got those done. I'm also a master craftsman through Certainteed. We do a lot of exteriors with our company as well. And they're a great partner with that. They help us make sure we can sort of have one house and one brand because they make so much materials. Really, my background has also been my family were a family of developers and builders. I kind of grew up on sawdust, and from there I got into the restoration side. And we always like to strive, just like Corey said, to set ourselves apart. And that's why we've gone the distance with the triple masters. That's why I've gone. I also have my MRS, the mold remediation specialist designation through the IICRC as well, which really led me down a whole different channel. And it's really helped us be a lot more successful than I imagined we ever would be. So I'm the founder of Guardian Restoration, and we're in altogether 27 locations in 9 states today. So
nice,
getting out there.
Well, cool. So you do fire. Corey, I want to go back to you for a moment. You mentioned water, master water. Do you guys participate in any fire restoration as well?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, that's important because my first question that I wanted to bring up was going to pertain to fire. I think a lot of our people watching and viewing today, I think our industry is heavily on the water side. And I often ask people, uh, why are you not involved in fire cleanup? Now, I don't want everyone doing it, especially if they're not trained well. We hate to see amateurs on fires. They're a much different beast. But I often see a lot of people just go for maybe it's because of the equipment, called the rental, and the profit they make on water and things like that. But my first question around stabilization, and to give you guys the audience, what I'm wanting today is I want to explain a little bit through context what stabilization means in a real world scenario, when you might want to do it, why, and then we're just going to get to the obvious is how it can still be a part of a revenue. It's not an overhead cost. It's a revenue center if you're doing it right for the right reasons. And I want to kind of leave everybody at the end of the podcast with a little bit of those. So, Jake, I'd like to start with you. I was thinking here about a question of I wanted to hear from your last, you're probably not on every job, but your last fire job, last fire restoration that you guys did. Talk me through the choice to do stabilization, what that might have in a short little piece, what that was, and then what switched it to the mitigation or the remediation to begin. Like, what was that transformation? What triggered that we're now out of stabilization and now we can begin the actual mitigation and cleaning of structure of contents, whatever that was. So call me through a little bit of that, if you could, the last fire job you did.
Yeah, so the last one I did, it was here in Kentucky, and in Kentucky, I kind of have an advantage because mold is regulated here. And being regulated, it really comes with then, you've got a book that you can put down and then really stand behind. And it really gives us an advantage versus a disadvantage. Some people will be like, regulation, it's all this red tape and all this type of stuff. But it really allows us to slow down, take that chaos and slow it all down and control not just the project, but our pace. And what also allows us to control our costs and control everything. And so when we first went in there, we know there might be a chance of contamination because we have soot, which is going to be a carcinogenic, and then we have water that's touching that soot. So then we have a possible Cat 3 scenario that's going on. So we immediately then go into, is there a mold? Well, by the time this fire investigation is done, maybe there will be before we're. So when we go into a fire, we immediately put it into stabilization. So when we get a call, it's going with DHUs on the truck. And it also helps lock in that customer for us too, because if they see equipment coming in and people coming in, and especially waiting outside to come in, it really helps them understand we're ready to do this now and it needs to happen now. And so we go in with the stabilization. We do that. And I think the last one probably lasted about 2 weeks. And that was when we did all of our asbestos testing, our lead testing. And during that process, we have a sister company that comes in and handles all the content for us as well. So we'll sub it out to our sister company. They come in and they handle all the content. We're handling any of the free water at that moment. But anything that's of immediate danger, that's almost just as much of a risk. And we have a preliminary assessment that's really, really cool. We spent almost 2 decades making sure that it follows every standard and every box that we need to check. And we've also been sort of even dipping into, we've made our own app for that. So it's kind of following that. And it helps us track everything that's going on and really make it profitable. But that, I think one of the things that I know we were talking a little bit of the financial things of why would you want to go into that stabilization stage? It really, there's so much money to be earned during that stage. Why would you want to pass it up? Not to mention the health risks of it. So we will take all the time that it needs to make sure that we do every step properly. And that's what we're going to sell to our customer. And it actually helps lock it in. And so we take those, for instance, this one was a 14-day period. And I think then the next 7 days was actually, we reheated the structure and we actually will reinvent that fire, if you per se, with the amount of heat that we produce, open the pores back up on that building so that as we're cleaning it, we're getting all that contamination out from that soot and any other contamination that's there by that time. So those first, out of the first 30 days, probably 14 days was our stabilization that I would technically put it under. And knowing that we're regulated, it really allows us to hold that strong. And then getting into reheating the structure and reinventing that fire atmosphere to open up the building materials as they were when they got contaminated. And that's usually about a 7 day process, 5 to 7 days, as we're cleaning it all out as well and getting all the contamination out. And then the next 7 days is almost a full dry out. And we actually almost do a sort of a flush and then dry out our clean. We're not drying out the initial water, we're drying out our clean.
So let me ask you a few follow-up questions. So stabilization would in this, and that's a pretty complex project. You got a lot of moving parts. You obviously have a lot of boxes to check there.
Yeah.
That would be a board up if there was a need for that to secure and lock in the building. Then there's some containment, because if you're going to run some dehumidification, and by the way, everyone listening, I think I could speak for Jake. The reason you're trying to dehumidify, you might tell yourself this is a total loss, but we're not going to create more secondary damage and more mold and more. There might be some content that we can save. So stabilization is part of a route of restoration. That is what we're hired to do. We're to restore, but we're also to prevent and mitigate. So you're getting some testing going on. You have some controlled environment in there. I suppose you have some air scrubbers that are kind of creating a little bit of a better thing. One thing I want to ask you, which is I hadn't thought about this when I wrote my questions, is that you're using a partner sister company, a Contents. They have to like follow your PPE policy, right? So you're like, hey, we're in stabilization. We have a lot of unknowns, and you need to enter. And I think that's something that's missed a lot is how our subs are a reflection of us and you. And you're responsible for their health as workers. I mean, they've got their own insurance, but you have to set the parameters of a job that alerts them to what the hazards and risks are, and then they must comply to the OSHA, because you're still the competent person on the project. I love that. This was you said heat it back up. Was this a cold weather job? Was this during the cold winter?
Yeah, it was in December.
Yeah. I think that's a whole different subject of the biology of cleaning and the chemistry of heating it back up. That's something that I think less than 1% people do that. I think you would agree with that, but that's really cool. So your customer was this was a residential, or was this commercial? I forgot to ask.
Yeah, no, this was a residential, but it was almost probably a quarter of the house. So the whole house was affected, the whole attic, and of course, then they had three volunteer fire departments show up. So of course, there was a lot of water involved. So yeah, but yeah.
Cool. Corey, you got a recent job or one that you remember in the past that where the stabilization played a big part of the beginning of the project?
Yeah, I mean, are we still talking about a fire job here?
Yeah, just specifically fire, because I think that our industry might think that stabilization would only apply to water, but fires have water as well. But fires have different hazards. So I wanted to bring up fires for sure.
Yeah. Recently, I mean, we had a lightning strike actually hit a house south Fort Worth here, burned up the whole attic, and so pretty bad fire. They had to put it out, obviously, with water that traveled down to the rest of the building. And so the one thing that we always have a little bit of a problem maybe with is temp power, right? Do we need to get a generator out there? Do we need to get somebody to put, because a lot of times you're going to get the power turned off when they have electrical wiring that's affected, right? So this one, we got a generator out there. We put up some dehues, air scrubbers with carbon filters, to keep down the contaminants. And then, while we're stabilizing, there was only one door that needed boarded up, so we did that. But because obviously the fire's in the attic, right? So we didn't blow out the windows or anything, but there was just one door that was affected. In terms of that, it was really more water affecting the home than the fire, but there was plenty of fire and soot as well. Basically collapsed all the insulation down from the attic into the whole house, as I'm sure all of us have seen many times. But yeah, so get the dehues, the generator, the temp power, get the air scrubbers and the with the carbon filters, specifically for soot. And then while we're stabilizing, right, there's several things that we're doing. Number one, we're getting our PPE on, checking out the loss, writing up the scope of work. Asbestos testing, obviously, super important down here in Texas. If it's not a commercial project, a lot of people think that it has to be before 1980 to test. We test every single job. The test for asbestos, we got to get a fire inspector release, right? We don't want to spoliate the damage. And then we always ask, right? We talk to the insurance adjuster and say, is there going to be a inspector from your company as well? Because we want to make sure that they release the scene. The last thing we want is to get blamed for, spoliating a scene. And then we do the next thing that we did, right, is air quality and VOC testing. Get a company in there to tell us, hey, this is how much soot there is. This is what we recommend. Obviously, we know what we're doing, but it always helps to have additional documentation from an outside source. So an indoor environmental professional, an IEP, we bring those in to test and see, hey, make sure we're all on the same page. So these are all things we're doing while the stabilization is going, right? We got dehues, scrubbers. It was probably, I think it was 7 days of stabilization before before everything was released. We wait on the report from the environmental company as well. We want to make sure that everything is aligned with what we're seeing and what they do, because obviously we know what we're doing and we know what we're seeing, but we're not testing it, right? We're not biologically saying, okay, is this a combustion material, or how much soot is there, what things can be salvaged, right? So it helps us in terms of documentation to get those things from the IEP. And so once we receive that, we make sure that our scope is clear. And then we talked with the customer about the next steps.
Hey, Corey, a couple things I heard there is a lot of people really freak out about, oh my goodness, I don't have power, the cost, the expense of having a generator, and then of course the subsequent fuel and labor. It really gets a lot of people, especially smaller companies that don't own those. You're going to rent those, and you're looking at the cost, and it's going to, and you start to think about, and I would argue, I think all three of us on this podcast today will agree, most of our industry, much of our industry, I don't know what percent, will approach a project not thinking about what the project needs and the customer and your employees, but what the insurance will pay for. And that's just not the right approach. It needs to be considered. Your customer needs to be involved in their carrier and how they're going to pay for it. That's their decision. That's why I look at remediation like a medical procedure. A doctor would not go in and work on my knee or my heart until they did some blood tests, until they did some other preliminary thing. We don't just rush in. I know everyone wants it to go super fast, but it's because they don't know what we know. So asbestos testing, yes, all buildings, regardless of age of building. It's funny. I've got a white paper that we wrote for that. I'm going to put the link for the white paper in the bottom description. I was telling Corey before we fired up, that's been downloaded somewhere around 11,000, 12,000 times from people and when I look at the list of who's downloaded, of course, there's a lot of restorers, a lot of insurance companies, a lot of adjusters or people with insurance companies, State Farm, Liberty Mutual, have downloaded this. And my question is what are they doing with it? Will they now recognize the laws that apply and then how it relates to their policy and stop pushing back on it? My guess is no, they're still going to do what they do, but I found that to be a very interesting. So that's a good stabilization. 7 days for that job versus 14. But it's ready when it's ready, right? You get the results. Everything else has been cleared. I've had jobs that were stabilized for longer than 14. I'm sure you guys have too. So I want everyone to know that, this is the very first good impression that you've got to show your customer, your community, your team, and the industry that we're professionals. This is what professionals do. I would actually question if anybody that doesn't do that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Hey, let me jump to another little topic. Corey, I'd like to stay with you since we just finished up. Tell me about a time that you almost skipped environmental testing and didn't. Like, what made you stop and test? Like, there was a job, some kind of conditions that something, and if you don't have one, that's fine. But did you
No, I got
almost
one.
not do
Yeah.
asbestos testing, and then you decided to, and then of course, what happened? What's that story look like? Hey, if you're enjoying this conversation on our podcast, I want you to know that this is a little piece of what RBA looks like. This is our academy, Restoration Business Academy, but it's also our community. This is where we take it away from the Facebook and the social media platforms where it's generally less than professional, although you can find good information. This is where we work through other things together with other people like us, and we do that every single week and month and all through the year over at the Academy. It's our courses, it's content, it's community, it's live coaching events, and then access to get some help from ourselves or some other people on the things that really, really just get you stuck in your business so you can move forward. So if you're interested in going a little deeper, I invite you to check it out and join the other great people, the 8% that are over there now. Take care. Back to the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I can think of one right off the top of my head. So last year we had one. It was the homeowner pushing back, or said, hey, this house was built 2023. There's no asbestos here, right? There's no need to test. I don't want to pay for it, etc. We said, okay, let me explain to you your reservations here. So a lot of materials that, especially in Texas, right? Because we get, things come from Mexico and other places. We got the Gulf Coast imports things. They don't have regulations on building materials in these other countries. And so there's no guarantee that whatever's in your house is not asbestos. Now, the chances are low, but we're not going to take a chance with our people. So if you want to, cancel the job, that's your prerogative. But I would, it's professionally, I would recommend making sure that there's no asbestos in this home before you hire another company, because it wouldn't only affect our people or whatever people you hire, but it would affect your family as well. And so, push back. It was built 2023, blah, blah, blah. Sent them over all the data that I have. Some of it specifically from you, Clark, that, we had several houses in 2022, 2020 that tested positive for asbestos. And so just saying, hey, I mean, the chances are non-zero, and that means we have to test. And so eventually they got on board. They said, okay, I understand. Go ahead and do it. And so, that's how we manage that.
You had a little bit of an obstruction there, and it was clear. It ended up being clear.
Yeah, it was clear. But then the other thing was the techs, right? The tech called. He's like, man, I'm going to lose this job. Can we just skip it? And I said, absolutely not. We cannot skip it. They're like, I know that you're worried about losing the job. We need to worry about you, right? We need to worry about your health, and we're not going to skip it.
It's also bigger than that, Corey. Let's just say you have 100 restorers on every corner, which is true for Dallas, and I'm sure Jake has more than enough competition. And I don't run my business based on competition. I don't think either of you do. But if you start subverting the standards and breaking laws and becoming unprofessional, if you have a very savvy competitor that wants to start making an example of you about who does what's right and what's wrong, don't be the one that's doing it wrong, because no amount of your marketing is going to help you overcome that. You're now going to be the person in town that doesn't do the right work, and that doesn't live with you. I'd rather be said, they're a little stubborn about their laws, but I'm glad they are. I think that's a pretty good thing. So it's interesting. You're because I believe, Corey, your structure for your incentivization for your techs, they're incentivized on commissions, right? Are you running that business structure?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yes.
He was looking at it from his own pocket. I'm going to lose this job. And of course, that's where I would say, well, we're going to train more so that we can get those customers on board so we don't lose these jobs. And of course, if you lose a job because a customer doesn't want you to follow laws and standards, it might not have been a job you wanted to have in the first place, right? That might be a low character. So, Jake, I see you're nodding your head. Do you have a story where you almost didn't follow your own procedures and broke your own policies?
Oh man, we had a recent one where it was a moment where like a big tree fell right next to you, and you just escaped it, right? Because we almost did it. And this is This is what my story is. So we had a recent job, and it was just a bathroom had a pipe leak, and it had been going on a while, but that doesn't matter when it comes to the asbestos testing. So we went in and we tested, and this was over Christmas time and New Year's. We sent the lab or we sent our samples into the lab, and the lab kept saying they didn't get it, they didn't get it, and then Christmas passed and New Year's passed, and then all of a sudden they found it, and then they didn't find it, and really it was just some chaos going on at the lab. Well, we had now passed 2 weeks, now 3 weeks, now going 3.5 weeks, and we're over there stabilizing this entire time. But obviously, at some point, someone's going to stand up and say, you got to make something happen. What's going on? Why is this taking so long?" And we were in stabilization. The customer was fine, but the insurance was pushing. And so we almost said, you know what, we're just going to have to make a call. The house was built in the 90s. And so we were like, we're going to be safe. Most likely, we're going to be safe. Maybe we can make the call. And right before we sent the guys, the test results came in, and it came in as asbestos. So we just literally, luckily, it was like the one time we were going to bend it because we were like, for sure. And this has now been 3.5 weeks. And then it literally hit our email, and it was asbestos. And what we were going to do was go ahead and just assume it was and just, go forward. But even still, it was a moment of, this is why we do this.
Almost broke our own rule. And the longer it is, the more pressure and the more people. And listen, in commercial, it's even more, that pressure is bigger because they're losing money. It's not just an inconvenience and things. It's not they're not losing money on the cost of stabilization. We can talk about the cost, but from their business interruption, losing business, losing people, losing products and things like that. So we're going to have all those. And I would tell anyone listening, Jake, that's a great story. I love that one. I would just say, get real good today before you have to face this problem. Meet with your team. How will we handle this? I always use the joke of astronauts and space people don't practice walking in space when they're in space. They do it in Houston or Cape Canaveral. We got to practice. It's like football. It's like sports. You don't just show up on Saturday's game and hope that you can tackle and that you can read the plays. I think that these are areas like, what are we going to do when stuff's really tough? Who do we have core values? Of course. What do those mean? If they don't mean anything, we've got a big problem. Guys, I have a colleague that he was a client for a very long time. That's a unique unicorn in Buffalo, New York. Bob Timmel. Corey, you may know who Bob is. We call him Captain Bob. Fire chief.
I know.
He does so much work on assessment, diagnostics, and testing on the front side that and he uses IEPs and IHs on certain jobs all the time. All of them he's told me the IEPs show up and say, "Bob, you guys do more than anybody that I've ever seen. Like you're almost an IEP yourself." So VOC meters. So every fire they do, what are the hazards of, how compacted is this job with carcinogens, and and that decides, they use PAPRs, but they're going to use PAPRs, and how long will they keep PAPRs on? Because as long as the hazard's still there, but testing tape lifts for the soot, char, what was burned, what materials burned. So, if you're trying to go fast and get big real fast, this becomes very difficult. When you're trying to be here for a long time and not just a good time, this becomes important. So I love to hear how you both are handling. And I want people to hear this, that you're just like them and I'm just like you guys. And we're just average Joes trying to make a living, put our place on the world, build something great. But we also, you only have one integrity. It's only there for one time until it's not. And then it takes a real hard time. Let's go over we talked a little bit about Corey, about safety. I kind of wrote it down here like a little scenario. Crew sitting at the door of a fire loss on day one. What's the minimum PPE they're wearing before they even walk in? And what's driving that decision? Is it OSHA compliance, company policy, or something else? So you're approaching a fire. I guess I'm asking you, what's your process for before you know anything? Like, what's the automatic PPE for a fire?
Yeah. Before they walk in the door, they're going to have their gloves on. They're going to have a respirator. They're going to have, if it's a full face respirator, then they'll be fine there. If not, they're going to have goggles. They may be in a Tyvek suit, just kind of depending, but usually not on the first iteration, right? They're going to have booties on because even though it might be a fire and the house is messed up, right, we're still going to treat the customer's property like it's important, right? So, so yeah, we're going to have all of those things for sure. Fit tested respirators. If they have a beard like mine, they're going to have a hooded respirator. But yeah, they're not going to step in there and be breathing in carcinogens while trying to talk to the customer. And that's the other thing too, is we're always going to bring additional PPE because customers, they just walk right in there. They're just like, yeah, this is my firehouse. It's like, yeah, you shouldn't be breathing this in. Put this on, So that's how we usually start.
I would add, before I kick it over to Jake, we always had extra PPE. Now, you can't assign respiratory protection to a customer because they're not fit tested. You can't say that this is going to keep you safe. And we all know that from a fire, N95s aren't effective. But we had some for adjusters or carrier parties, consultants, or how many adjusters do you know that walk into every single job with zero protection? And I have told them, I said, listen, you're not my enemy, and I care about your damn health because I'm pretty much a human. You go into fires every single day, all day, or maybe it's water sometimes, but your exposure level is higher than the average bear because you go in all the time. And I would ask you to speak to your employer about what your policies are of exposure, like, get fit tested, have a mask. And they're always, but they don't know what we know. And that's why I don't let insurance companies dictate what we charge and do in prices. I wouldn't expect them to understand the complexities of running a remediation project. So therefore they can't dictate the scope, and therefore the price can't be reflected. But that's a whole different podcast. But I would always say, I would argue not a challenge, Corey, but fire, smoke, soot, char, and ash, the toxic nature of it is also dermal. So, there might be cases where no Tyveks are needed, but I would definitely say that there's high risk, and fire departments are really starting to really learn this a lot more. It's not just respiratory, it's dermal, absorbed into your skin, into your bloodstream for your benzenes and heavy metals and things like that. So, I think it has to make sense, and you have to have your own policy. But I love what you said is you tell the customer this is what we do every time. But I like that I like a laminated sheet. I like SOPs. This is how we do it. Jake, what's that story look like for you? What's your first assessment, your first strike team look like?
So again, like in our state, we have some people call it a burden. I think it's a great thing. We have regulation here. So it allows me to sort of create a real rubber stamp. So if we show up to a fire, we know there's going to be some type of contamination. So the trucks that are going out every day are equipped with basically what any type of mold contamination we would come into contact with. So for us, it's an automatic suit, it's an automatic respirator. You got the double gloves. We even make sure they got the right shoes on underneath, because when you're going through that fire, I can't tell you how many times my shoes have saved me from a nail. And so we really want to make sure that everyone's aware of what's going on. And is it safe with the electricity? Is it safe with what's the water situation? How much water is standing? Is the electricity on, off? A lot of times that fire department is, or the county is still allowing that electricity to be on, and it is not safe at all. So you really need to make sure that you're aware when you're going in of what hazards are above you, around you, beneath you. So so a lot of times, even when it comes to shoes, there's a lot of muck boots that we have and equip the trucks with. But I think it was really interesting because you were talking about how the adjuster always wants to enter these places. Where here, where it's regulated, we just tell them no, not until we're done. And they're just like, well, are you going to violate our right to inspect, right? And it says, no, I'm not violating anything. And it's just the state of Kentucky says you can't go in. It's that simple. And when we're done, you can go in. And
my obligation to laws and standards oversees your policy language is what I used to say. It's like, I understand you have policy, but I have an obligation as a contractor, as a certified company, means nothing if we don't do that. So believe us, this you'll inspect it. We're not doing anything that you can't see. But and by the way, here's our 500 pictures and in circle if you company cam if you want to see them.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
did, we did a board up, we did containment, and signage was a really big deal for us. Do not, and I would put the scary, almost a nuclear symbol. Don't come in here because we don't know what the conditions are and it's not safe. If you have any problems, you can call us at this number if we're not here with you. But that's incredible.
Yep.
Jake, I think we've covered, we kind of talked about the testing gap, and I want to hit that real quick. And anyone that's watching, I would beg anyone watching to learn what the real laws are on asbestos testing. Again, Corey said it, I think Jake said it. If you're not going to test, you must assume that it is and treat it as it's an asbestos, PACM. It's not, you're going to test for only the materials that are being disturbed. You don't test the entire house. And when you get pushback from other parties, customer, homeowner, adjuster, agent, whoever, just be gracious and merciful for a moment. Just remember they just don't know what you know, and say, do you have a few minutes for me to share with you something that might help you with every single claim you have in the future? And this is how we do it, why we do it. And we learned the hard way. We used to not be as stringent. Be graceful. This is an opportunity for you to build that character of being a professional. So anyone watching, I would say, get really good at that objection overcome, and have have a handout, have something you can give them to physically or email, and they have it for their records. They might not agree with it, they might not understand it or love it, but you at least, and they can go Google Foo and Chat GTP, the rest of it, and find out what they want to, hopefully. But I think what's really important to is client overcome is there will be, and probably most of the time, a carrier or homeowner, someone's going to say, well, there's someone else in town that says they can get started right away. And I would say, I would probably, this was always my go-to answer. I understand. And again, I see these same people that don't quite, I don't see them in the classroom that I'm in. I don't see them going to the training. I don't see them doing that. But hopefully I can get to them one day. But what I would worry about, Mr. Jones, is if you're starting off a relationship and a partnership, which is what this is going to be, if you're starting that off on a unprofessional or even deceiving, nefarious, deceptive relationship, I would actually worry about the rest of the relationship. I'm not saying they're bad people, but I would actually, it would bring into question. That's how I overcome stuff. I said, we are growing because we do stuff well and right. That's just it. No marketing can do that better. So anyone listening, I wanted you to make sure you got that. I wanted to get to one more thing. I don't know that it really needs to be explained, but we mentioned it as asbestos testing, environmental testing, stabilization can be a profit center. You don't, and I guess the question I'm coming to that, some people say, is that just overhead? Do you just eat it? Now I've got my equipment sitting there for 7 or 8 days and I've got people going out there, but nobody wants to pay for it. I would not recommend that. I certainly don't think it doesn't substantiate the professionalism of doing it. If it's free, it's probably not needed. Unless you just bake it into your overhead and raise your prices, which they're going to object to anyway. But tell me a little bit about what that billing looks like for you, Jake and Corey. Don't go into your prices, but what would be involved in your stabilization that would be a billable item on your invoice for Jake, for your 14-day job? What components were charged for?
Yeah, and I really think too, just to back up a little, I think if people realized that if they built in the system where you have a stabilization system and then a dry out system, and then you could really even realize you can have that stabilization period, then the remediation period, and then your mitigation period. And if you realize you build a system for each of those, all of a sudden you realize it's real opportunity. It's not a bad thing at all. It's actually great. One I talked about earlier, how it enables you to now control it. So now you can have an 8 to 5 response versus an immediate, I have to do this overnight, right now, all these after hours, and then fight to get reimbursed for that. Instead, when you put it into stabilization, you can now make it controlled 8 to 5. But also every day you've got to change those pre-filters on your scrubbers or your negative air machines. And every day you've got to check your humidities. And it's important to sort of summarize that, especially for the insurance company, because they really don't understand the stabilization. And all they're taught is I pay for this dry out or this much of a dry out or this, and they don't understand much of it at all. So we created a system specifically for stabilization, and this is how we act. And once everyone understands as a culture, this is what we're doing. And we have sales guys, but our sales guys are also our technicians. So not only do they learn to sell it, we make sure they learn how to dry it and how to really run the job. Even though they're not running the crews, they're doing that technician side for us. So for us, it really enables our service guy, or we call them ambassadors. They're salesmen, but we call them ambassadors. They're out there every day connecting with that customer and doing the teching with us. But who better to connect with the customer? And we also even split up our contracting. We go out and we literally tell them we're going to see if we can work well together through the cleanup process. If we do, then we can enter in a repair contract with you because that's really responsible. And how many times have we even responded to emergencies and you're like, I don't know if I wanted to repair for this lady or not because do I want that long relationship? So by us even breaking it into different contracts, and the customer ends up respecting it, especially when they come back and they say, wait, so it's almost human nature. When we move a little bit this way, they chase me. So when I tell them we're going to wait to contract that repair, it's almost like I moved away from them because I'm being responsible, which actually makes them react and kind of chase me forward. And then all they want to do is sign with me. So it then even connects into that repair in a responsible manner and way. So, but as we go through this stabilization, we're billing for our daily equipment, we're billing for those daily filter changes, and there's no reason to rush anything because you have all the time now to do your technician sheets, your moisture mapping, especially in the gray areas, because that's where you're going to end up fighting. You don't fight where the elephant in the room is, where the fire started. It's how far did it go? And those gray areas are where you end up fighting over. So it really enables you to have the time to slow everything down and document it and then win it and win it big because you had the time through the stabilization to do that. So it's a huge opportunity to actually increase your profits dramatically.
So good. Jake, a few things I heard there, or you have a system. That's 90% of it. It's just, if your customer sees that this is how we always do it, they're going to immediately be okay, I've hired the right person. If it's assholes and elbows, that doesn't instill a lot of stability and confidence in what you're doing. You know what we did, Jake, is are you would you say you're more of an Xactimate for your primary billing, or are you in some hybrid or a T&M world? What do you kind of is your principle?
Yeah, and we've created an app ourselves, and that app actually brings in all of the Xactimate line items. So as the techs are doing it, they're literally selecting the items as they move through. Then that transitions out to an Excel and then into a QuickBooks.
So what I love when you have phases, you have phase 1, phase 2, stabilization is a phase. I also let the customer and their adjuster, if they want to know, we're going to invoice you for that separately. That's going to be its own, I like to see invoices quickly go to customers' hands because it speeds up the payment terms. But the way we did things, and probably the way you could, is I'm able to every single day when I do a daily field report and to my customer, let them know what we did, what we overcame, what challenges, what progress, what we didn't get done, couldn't access something, what conversations we had. I can give them a burn rate. I can update the customer every day as this is where we are. If we're waiting, if stabilization ends up being not only the environmental delay, but even maybe a property manager, maybe some other party trying to confirm coverage or how they want to proceed with something, those delays can be different than your environmental. It's like, I'm not greenlighting you to go forward. We have some other decisions to make, but at least every day they know what it's called. There's not going to be a surprise. They're being like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were billing me every single day. So every day we're now at 2,300, we're at 1,400 or something like that. So I love that you're doing that. I'm going to come to Louisville and see your app one day. I think our industry needs to rethink of how they make common sense invoicing, billing, capture of cost, as opposed to the way we've always done it that might not still be relevant. Corey, do you have anything to add to that profit center area around, because I don't think any good business should be unprofitable. I think profitable companies can be more generous. So that's what I was going to. Corey, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Jake said. I mean, we don't necessarily have the same, we haven't built our own app yet, but yeah, obviously you're charging for the times the equipment's there. Something that Jake said earlier was very, something that I agree with is that you also have your equipment on site. And so that is, the physical and visual reminder that you're there for the customer. You're going out and checking it every day. So that you build that customer relationship. And then the other thing is, like, for us, I mean, it's probably the same for Jake, but we put a containment on every job, regardless of category, class, whatever it is. There's always going to be a containment. And so that's something we can be doing while we're waiting to start the demo. So we have flooring protection. We'll have, containments over doorways, big containments in the rooms if it's half the room, those things that'll all get set up so that when they go to do the demo, they're just walking into a prepped job site. So that's one other thing we could add.
All good stuff. I would like to close it out on my part, and then I want to kick it over to you for any closing comments about it. But I want to see our industry adopt a lot of professional activities like what we're talking about and profitable. I hate to see people that are working really hard not be profitable, because what it does is it leaves our customers in the hands of the less qualified that have bigger budgets for marketing that can lie to people. So I'm a big fan of a company that does good work, charging what they're worth, but it's a lot to overcome. I've been a small business my whole life. So I think that don't be afraid of the cost of doing it. Be afraid of the cost of not doing it. I wrote down here, if you have 7 employees and 5 years from now, they have left you, or they come across a blog from restoration advisors about the hazards of not stabilizing, and you've never done it, all of a sudden, inadvertently, I have created a hardship. Like, now you have employees that start maybe thinking about what they've been exposed to. So from a culture standpoint, today, if you're watching this, sit down with your team and say, I'd like to really address how we approach our culture of safety and all these core values that we have. I'd like to bring those into real world. So I also think that in this world of trying to find incredible A players for your team, being a company that is completely dialed in with SOPs and processes and a reputation of being high quality makes that a world different. Why do you think Chick-fil-A has people lined up trying to work there, doing a good job, smiling and wearing a uniform every day? Because it looks like a great place to work, as opposed to that place looks like a slave house. So I think those are really important things that I would like our industry to lock into their head. I will say, if you're not testing, you don't get in trouble for not stabilizing, but you can't properly do environmental testing if you don't stabilize. But if you're not testing for asbestos on every single job, contact me. I can give you some horror stories of real people, real names, real circumstances where they were audited back 3 years for all of their projects that they did, and they were willfully negligent on compliance with OSHA laws, and it would probably cripple, and it did, one of them, but that would cripple most companies with the exposure of the cost of that. So this is a big deal. I don't want to scare anyone, but I want to scare everybody to say, ask yourself, have you been the professional and why you haven't been? And then just overcome that. Corey, anything to close it out with?
Yeah, a couple of things. So the listeners can hear this. At least in Texas, the fines for not testing for asbestos or operating on a asbestos job without proper procedures and things is $80,000 a day. So it's pretty important that you do these things.
It's a lot of zeros.
Yep. Sure is. It sure is. And then the last thing I would say is, I mean, if you're not stabilizing, you're just not following the S500 at all. I mean, it's very clearly in there. The initial stabilization phase is part of the project. I haven't heard of a lot of people not stabilizing, but if that's something that they're not doing, you need to be doing that. You got to get dehumidifiers in immediately and start mitigating damage, stabilizing the environment. It's super important that you do that. You shouldn't just be walking in and starting to demo things or whatever. But we see it, right? I mean, there's companies out there that they're fly by night or whatever, or they just are trying to make the buck. But we're here for the customers and we're here for our employees, and so we gotta stabilize and we gotta do the testing.
I think we could agree with both of you on this. I'm going to kick it over to Jake and let him finish this up here. But I think both of us all of us on the call, we just went through whatever Winter Storm Fern. We went through a pretty cold event that increased our volume. It's in those times where stabilization and these processes that are so important, they get to be tested and tried and true, and just they get hard to become. How do you scale with this many jobs coming in, knowing we've got to do all those things? That's something that I think you have to figure out, because it's in these times where if you're doing more jobs and you're not doing the right way, you're just exposed that many times more to people, and they will remember how you were like an EMT. If they were busy with a train wreck and there's like a lot of casualties, if they started forgetting their processes and just doing, now there is triage, but not to where it's unsafe. You can speed things up. You can do things a little differently. But I would say just most recently, relative to when we recorded this, we just had like a little of a freeze event through the middle and the heartland of America over into the East Coast. And I would say that's when we could probably be very picky and tell people we see a lot of the breaking of that. Jake, why don't you finish this out, buddy? You got anything to add, kicker at the end that you'd like to see your industry do better?
Yeah, I think building on what you were talking about as far as even scaling and even speaking to other restoration company owners, if you want to really scale, for me, a huge part of us being able to scale and keep scaling, even since I think November, we've hired 45 more new technicians just since November. And we're scaling really rapidly. A huge part of that is the stabilization process. If we didn't have the stabilization process, it would cause too much of a chaotic atmosphere, even in the work environment all the time. By putting in this stabilization, it's not just a benefit for the testing side, but it's a benefit for the scaling of your business, the control of your business, especially speaking to your controllers that are running those businesses. It really helps you get a hold of it, predict it, plan it, and manage it at a whole nother level, and even slow it down. Your volume can increase 3, 4, or 5 times that, because now you're stabilizing in between them. It really enables you to take on more work. So if everyone's worried about the money's in stabilization. You need to figure it out. You need to build a system for it.
That's a good point. So stabilizing, using a good process and plan around controlling, allows you to acquire more leads and to manage more projects, as opposed to just fire drill on every single one. That's a great thing. You mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned, you said controllers. I was thinking of from financial standpoint. I see a lot of people bleed a lot of money from just not having a good budget, not knowing where the spend's going and where the billing's slipping out and they're not capturing. So these are all good reasons you brought up, Jake, of slow down to speed up type of thing. It really is a masterful skill of a black belt. It feels counterintuitive to the way we've always been in this industry. You mean slow down? We're measured on how fast we go. We're really not. We think we are. We look at other people and they may, other restorers might do that, but your customer just wants to know that, are you the professional I thought you were? And are you looking out for me and my building and my people? So that's really cool, man. I will tell you guys, I want this, I want this podcast to resonate in the minds of, and they do. These my white paper and these conversations I have, strangers contact me or Toby and my team, and they probably do you. I saw what you said on stage. I saw what you said, something, dude, I've never thought about like that. And now you've helped us manage that part of it. So I want this to be, and by the way, I didn't always do it the right way. In my very earliest days, it was just get in there and get it done, right? Get after it. It was only after I learned from better people and mistakes and costly fines that we didn't. But I hope this rings true for that. And I wanted to really thank you guys for boots on the ground, doing this thing every single day, are not on stage, or not social media icons. Well, Corey kind of is. Corey's kind of a big deal, just in case you didn't know. By the way, shout out to Corey. Corey showed up down in Kerrville, Texas this summer when I was back there, when we had a really big disaster where the river flooded and there was a lot of death. And Corey and a colleague of his loaded up a trailer from Dallas Fort Worth and headed down. just super, super gracious, super generous to help that community. Hung around for a couple of hours, I believe, and helped out some people with some distribution of that stuff. Thank you, Corey, for doing that. That meant the world to me to see you show your professionalism that way. And I think everybody here would like to get to a point where they have the opportunity to do things like that. When you have a profitable company, when you have a controlled company, it frees you up to be the kind of person you hope you're being. So I appreciate both of you, man. You guys are awesome. Anybody wants to link up, if you're in Louisville and you want to see how to do things right, I bet Jake would go have coffee with you at some point. He wants
Absolutely.
to rise all the ships with the tides, right? And I think we both agree with that. And Corey, you guys kind of have a little get together and gatherings in Dallas sometimes. Just keep it up, man. But that's it. Appreciate y'all. Have a great weekend. Take care. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Restoration. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Disaster Podcaster. We had a lot of fun making this one. We went through a lot of people trying to make sure that we found the right guests that understand the complexities and these topics and actually had relevant stories to share. If you got this far in your business is at a point where you say, I'm ready to really, really move forward, but also be around other people that have scaled their companies or in the middle of making big moves, I'd like to invite you to join us out to our Montana business retreat. This is an annual event that we hold, Whitefish, Montana, in the shadow of Glacier National Park. We do this at a great lodge. It's a couple of days. I'm going to click the link down below. I've made it very affordable for people to go because I want the right number of people there, but it's a very small group. It's about 30 people total. We do this every year. It sells out fast, and it might be sold out by the time you have seen this, but we do this every single year, every summer in June in Whitefish. So if you're interested, join the rest of the all-stars that are going to be there. And we'll see you there too. Take care.